The rain had begun its quiet drum against the city streets, turning neon reflections into shimmering rivers on the asphalt. Lily's heels clicked nervously against the wet pavement as she adjusted the thin shawl around her shoulders, her breath visible in the cold night air. From the corner of her eye, the tall building seemed to lean toward her, whispering of past mistakes and unspoken fears. She could hear laughter from a nearby club, muffled but sharp, a stark contrast to the storm within her chest. Tonight, she wasn't just stepping into a party, she was stepping into a storm she had never imagined facing. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorman's velvet rope, the familiar scent of expensive cologne and cheap perfume mingling in the air. Before we dive deeper, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? It amazes me how far a single story can travel. Drop your city, let's see how wide kindness still spreads. The party was a cathedral of light and music, walls draped in gold and crystal chandeliers casting fractured rainbows over the crowd. Lily's smile felt hollow as she entered, each step echoing like a drumbeat of anticipation. She scanned the room, looking for the familiar face she had once trusted, the man who had been the axis of her world, Michael. And then she saw him, standing tall at the center, the aura of dominance unmistakable. Every head turned as he raised a hand, his voice smooth, but sharp enough to cut through the music. Ladies and gentlemen, a toast, to those who think they can betray me. Murmurs swept through the room like wildfire, and Lily felt her chest tighten. Michael's eyes locked onto hers, a flicker of recognition, then something darker, colder. "Lily," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "You thought loyalty could survive the test of ambition?" The laughter around her was deafening, not for joy, but for humiliation, a symphony composed to dismantle her dignity. Her hands shook as she tried to find footing amidst the storm of stares, every whispered insult another nail in a coffin built of memories she once cherished. It had been a year of careful planning, a year of suppressed anger and quiet vengeance, and tonight it had all been orchestrated to perfection. Lily could feel the weight of every gaze as if each one was probing the depths of her soul. She remembered the nights she had spent hoping he would see her as more than a pawn, nights she had whispered promises to herself that loyalty would be enough. Now, loyalty felt like a cruel joke, one played by the very man who once called her his equal. And yet, as tears threatened to spill, her eyes found a small figure in the crowd, her younger brother, Ethan, hiding behind the ornamental pillars, clutching his jacket like a shield. His presence grounded her, a tether to reality, a reminder that not all battles had to be fought alone. Her lips quivered as she whispered under her breath, "I will not let him win, not tonight." A waiter brushed past her, dropping a tray of champagne glasses. The sharp clink resonated like a starting gun, and for a moment, she imagined herself shattering like the glass at his feet. But instead of crumbling, she straightened, inhaled the cold, perfumed air, and began moving toward the shadows at the edge of the hall. Every step was measured, deliberate, a silent protest against the orchestrated chaos. The music thumped around her, bass echoing like her heartbeat, syncing with the pulse of the crowd, yet isolating her in a bubble of unspoken defiance. Then came the first chance, a kind hand, warm and steady, brushing her elbow, guiding her into a quieter corridor. She glanced up to see a stranger, a man she didn't know, offering a small, reassuring smile. His eyes weren't judgmental, they didn't gleam with curiosity or amusement. They offered a pause, a fleeting reprieve from the storm. If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest, comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters. The corridor smelled faintly of old wood and candle wax, an odd sanctuary tucked behind the party's facade. Lily sank against the wall, closing her eyes, trying to breathe past the sting of humiliation. The man didn't speak immediately. He simply leaned against the opposite wall, letting the silence stretch, a quiet shield around her shaken spirit. She had always believed that power belonged to those who could control fear, but here, in the dim light, she realized sometimes strength is knowing when to accept small kindnesses. Michael's laughter drifted faintly through the walls, a relentless reminder that the world she had trusted could turn cruel in an instant. But even through the haze of betrayal, Lily's mind began piecing together the steps she would take. Every insult, every mocking glance, was a stone in the foundation of a plan that had been silently growing for months. The humiliation wasn't just pain, it was fuel. Ethan's whispered reassurance from the other end of the corridor nudged her forward, the certainty of family and love intertwining with the cold logic of revenge. The stranger's nod, almost imperceptible, reminded her that empathy still existed in the world, even when the darkness seemed overwhelming. And as she drew a shaky breath, Lily realized she could still rewrite the narrative, not just for Michael, but for herself. Her fingers grazed the edge of her shawl, tracing patterns as if drawing courage from the fabric itself. The distant echo of music, laughter, and sharp whispers formed a perverse symphony that sought to break her. But beneath it, a heartbeat thrummed, hers, unyielding, insisting that the story was not over, that tonight's storm would not claim her entirely. She straightened fully, glancing back at the hallway's exit, eyes gleaming with determination. Tonight, humiliation had found her. But she would not let it define her. Lily stepped back into the edges of the ballroom, her presence almost invisible beneath the swirling gowns and tailored suits. Michael was still the center of attention, orchestrating whispers like a maestro, but she had learned a small, vital truth in the corridor: sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the loudest weight. She spotted the stranger again, now tending to a toppled glass on the floor. His hand was steady, patient, almost imperceptibly giving her space, yet offering a silent message: you are not alone. Her heart thumped, a mix of fear and cautious hope. The weight of embarrassment had not lifted, but the reminder that someone, even a stranger, could act with kindness sparked a tiny flame inside her. She realized that human decency didn't always come with loud applause or recognition, it sometimes came quietly, in the shadows, in the smallest of gestures. Lily wanted to nod, to smile, but instead she simply whispered a "thank you," her voice barely audible above the music. Michael's eyes swept the room and landed on her again, the malicious glint unchanging. He raised a glass in her direction, smirk curling across his lips, yet she refused to meet the shame with weakness. She forced herself to inhale deeply, letting the stranger's calm presence anchor her. Every whisper, every pointed glance, felt like a dagger, but she began crafting her composure like armor, each breath a reinforcement. The night pressed on, a carousel of laughter, champagne, and brittle smiles. Guests chatted, clinking glasses and exchanging compliments, unaware of the internal storm raging just beyond their perception. Lily moved along the perimeter, her eyes catching snippets of conversations, a friend consoling another, a glance of admiration at someone's courage, subtle signals that humanity still persisted even in the coldest of settings. The world was not entirely cruel, it simply required endurance to find those sparks. Her thoughts drifted to her own past kindness, the times she had helped quietly without expecting anything in return. A memory surfaced of a winter morning when she had found an elderly man struggling with groceries outside her apartment building. She had helped him carry the bags upstairs, his gratitude soft and genuine, leaving an impression that lingered long after the act. In moments like that, she realized, courage and compassion were intertwined, one nurtured the other. She glanced back toward the stranger, who now moved to adjust a decorative plant near the dance floor. Something in his quiet, unobtrusive behavior made her wonder about the lives of strangers, the silent kindnesses they might carry, unseen by the world but felt by those who needed them. A fleeting smile brushed her lips, a spark of warmth cutting through the chill of the party. The music shifted, a slower, haunting melody now filling the room. Michael raised his glass again, addressing a new cluster of guests, his laughter still laced with sharp edges. Lily found herself at the far end of the hall, close enough to hear, yet protected by shadows. She realized the humiliation she had suffered was temporary, the memory of small, sincere kindness would remain far longer, anchoring her spirit in ways his cruelty could not reach. "Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would?" she whispered to herself, thinking of the stranger, of Ethan's presence, of the winter morning with the old man. Gratitude, she realized, was contagious. She imagined sending a silent thank you across the room, as though her thoughts could touch the lives of all those small actors in her world. And then Michael stepped closer, unaware that his power over her was waning. "You look fragile tonight," he said, voice dripping with condescension. Lily straightened, meeting his gaze calmly, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. He smirked, a predator enjoying the torment. But she felt the strength of the tiny ember of hope kindled in the corridor. The stranger shifted slightly, moving just enough to keep a discreet watch on her. That small act, no words, no fanfare, reinforced the lesson that kindness could exist even where cruelty was orchestrated. She began to understand that strength was not just about retaliation, but also about embracing the quiet moments of humanity that punctuated life's harshest trials. Michael's voice rose again, this time mocking a fellow guest, and the room laughed, a hollow sound that bounced off the gilded walls. Lily's mind, however, had started to catalogue small victories, her calm breath, her unwavering gaze, the steady presence of people who showed care even without recognition. The humiliation around her was loud, but the silence of empathy spoke louder, a reminder that the world wasn't entirely his to command. She leaned slightly against a wall, the tension in her shoulders easing just enough to feel the pulse of resilience. Every passing moment, every unnoticed gesture of kindness, strengthened her resolve. She realized she had a choice, to allow the night to break her, or to carry each subtle act of human decency as fuel for what she would do next. If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest, comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters. The ballroom lights flickered with a gentle hum as servers passed by, their movements fluid and professional. Lily's eyes followed a group of guests laughing together, noticing for the first time the subtleties of human connection amidst the spectacle of wealth and power. Each smile, each unspoken gesture of understanding or empathy, reminded her that even in a world designed to humiliate and divide, compassion had not vanished. Michael's presence remained, a dark shadow over the room, but Lily no longer felt entirely under his sway. She was learning that strength could be drawn not only from confrontation, but also from observation, from understanding, and from the quiet, often invisible kindnesses that persisted in even the grandest halls. And in that understanding, Lily found a fragile, flickering hope, the kind that could grow into something unstoppable if nurtured carefully, patiently, and without haste. As the night stretched on, Lily's mind wandered beyond the shimmering chandeliers and laughter, deeper into memories she had tried to bury. She remembered how Michael had once been different, the man who had whispered promises in quiet corners, whose hands had held hers as if shielding her from the world. They had shared dreams of something beyond wealth and power, simple visions of trust and partnership, of a life built on mutual respect rather than dominance. But ambition, she had learned, could twist love into something unrecognizable, and the man she had once loved had become a reflection of the very world he claimed to despise. The music shifted again, a slow, melancholic tune that seemed to seep into the very walls of the grand hall. Lily moved along the edge, her gaze falling on familiar faces from her past, colleagues, acquaintances, people who had once witnessed the lighter moments of her life. Each nod, each polite smile, reminded her of the person she had been before humiliation and revenge entered her story. It was strange, she thought, how a single night could strip away layers of confidence and pride, leaving only raw, vulnerable memories in its wake. She remembered the countless nights she had spent working tirelessly, sacrificing her own comfort to ensure projects succeeded, to ensure promises were kept. And Michael, once her partner, once her closest friend, had seen those sacrifices as weaknesses to exploit. His laughter, sharp and calculated, echoed in her mind, intertwined with memories of whispered apologies that never reached their intended sincerity. It was a cruel contrast, the way love had transformed into ridicule, trust into manipulation. The stranger who had offered her a quiet reprieve in the corridor appeared again, placing a hand gently on the back of a chair as he guided a nervous guest towards safety. Lily couldn't help but notice his quiet composure, the way he moved without claiming attention, giving assistance without expecting acknowledgement. In a world dominated by spectacle, his presence was a reminder that dignity and kindness could still exist quietly, invisibly, and yet profoundly. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? She whispered to herself again, the question no longer rhetorical. The thought of those silent saviors, those unnoticed acts of compassion, gave her strength. She thought of her younger brother Ethan, who had been her anchor through family struggles, and the stranger whose quiet support had allowed her to gather herself. Gratitude, she realized, could exist even amidst betrayal and humiliation. Michael's gaze found her again, sharp and piercing, but Lily no longer felt the same helplessness. Instead, she allowed herself a small, deliberate smile, not for him, not for the crowd, but for herself. It was a tiny reclaiming of autonomy, a reminder that humiliation could sting, but it could not erase resilience. The laughter around her continued, but she had begun to perceive it differently. The mockery was loud, but it was temporary. The moments of empathy, no matter how fleeting, would endure. Her mind returned to the party itself, the meticulous orchestration of her public shame. She had underestimated his planning, underestimated his desire for control. But she now understood something vital: power wielded through fear could not touch the heart of someone who had learned to value subtle, enduring kindness. Each unnoticed gesture she had observed, each whispered reassurance from strangers or family, was a building block of inner strength that no amount of public humiliation could dismantle. Michael moved through the crowd, raising his glass again, drawing attention to his own clever orchestration of ridicule. Lily observed him with quiet calculation, noticing the tiny cracks in his polished exterior, the brief hesitation, the faint flicker of uncertainty in his otherwise unshakable gaze. She realized that control was always an illusion, and those who relied on it too heavily were vulnerable in ways they could never foresee. Her thoughts drifted to the countless people in her life who had quietly shaped her resilience: mentors, friends, family members who had offered guidance, understanding, and care. Their influence had been subtle but profound, building the foundation she now leaned on. And Michael, with all his calculated cruelty, could not undo that foundation. She allowed herself a few deep breaths, centering on the warmth that lingered in her chest from those past acts of kindness. It was a stark contrast to the cold, perfumed hall she occupied now, a reminder that the world contained both cruelty and compassion, often intertwined in the same space. Lily's determination solidified: she would not be defined by his vengeance or the humiliation he sought to impose. Instead, she would carry forward the lessons of empathy and strength, letting them guide her next steps. Her eyes briefly met the stranger's again, and she offered a subtle nod of acknowledgement. No words were needed, the shared understanding was enough. Small kindnesses mattered. They were the quiet forces that could endure beyond the orchestrated chaos of a single night. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? She repeated softly, this time with resolve rather than question. Right, yes, and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. As the room continued its symphony of music, laughter, and whispered gossip, Lily felt a calm center within herself. The chaos could rage around her, Michael could continue his show of control, but she had discovered a truth that no party, no humiliation, no revenge could erase: strength was quiet, resilience was cultivated, and kindness, no matter how small, left a permanent mark. She straightened fully, her gaze scanning the hall, calculating her next move. Tonight was not over, and the story had only just begun. The night had deepened, and the grandeur of the party began to feel almost suffocating. Lily's eyes caught the glint of crystal glasses reflecting the overhead chandeliers, each one like a tiny prism fracturing the truth of the evening. Michael was now speaking to a new circle of influential guests, the smirk never leaving his face, projecting an image of perfect control. But Lily noticed the subtle tremor in his hands as he raised the glass, a fleeting glimpse behind the mask he wore so carefully. He was confident, yes, but human weaknesses rarely stayed hidden forever. Lily moved closer to the edge of the crowd, weaving silently, her pulse steady, the lessons of the night embedding themselves deeper into her mind. She could hear snippets of conversations, compliments thrown casually, veiled criticisms barely disguised as jokes. Every laugh that had once pierced her now passed like water around a rock. It couldn't erode her resilience. She drew a slow breath, letting the energy in the room sharpen her focus rather than dull her senses. The stranger who had guided her earlier was now tending to a nervous guest near the dance floor. His movements were deliberate but gentle, offering assistance without fanfare. The world often missed these small acts, a hand to steady someone, a word whispered when no one else listened, but they were everything. Lily felt a spark of inspiration ignite, realizing that power and kindness could coexist, and that true influence came from what you could give quietly, not what you could take loudly. Her gaze met a young woman near the punch bowl, trembling slightly as she tried to navigate the room alone. Without thinking, Lily approached her. "Hey," she said softly, extending a hand. "It's crowded, I know. Here, come with me for a moment." The woman looked surprised, hesitant, and then, with a grateful nod, followed Lily toward a quieter corner. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant in the chaos of the ballroom, but it felt monumental to Lily. She felt the warmth of purpose blossom in her chest. Each kind act, no matter how tiny, built momentum, quietly pushing back against the weight of humiliation and fear that had pressed on her all night. Michael's voice rose again, calling attention to another guest, mocking them in front of everyone. The sound could have rattled Lily, could have pulled her back into insecurity, but she noticed it for what it was: theater, smoke and mirrors meant to intimidate. His words had power only if she let them. And she wouldn't. She led the young woman to a quiet alcove, offering her a chair. "It's okay," Lily whispered. "Breathe. You're safe here." The woman's lips trembled as she murmured a thank you, her eyes glistening with relief. In that moment, Lily felt a profound shift, a small piece of redemption, a tiny spark of light piercing through the storm of orchestrated cruelty. "Now it's your turn, share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." As Lily guided the young woman back toward a less intimidating path through the crowd, her mind wandered to Michael's past actions, the ways he had attempted to control and humiliate her. Each memory carried a sting, yet the sting was tempered by what she was learning tonight, that she could reclaim control through compassion rather than confrontation. Strength could be quiet, subtle, and infinitely more enduring than any display of dominance. She glanced toward Michael again. His eyes flicked to her briefly, the smirk lingering, but there was something different now. He sensed she was no longer simply a victim. She was a presence to reckon with, grounded in something deeper than fear or submission. And though he did not understand it, he had begun to lose control, not because of her words, not because of a dramatic act, but because of the quiet confidence she carried, the small acts of kindness that radiated strength. The music changed, swelling into a slow, resonant rhythm. Guests paired off to dance, their laughter now tempered with the rhythm of intimacy. Lily's steps were deliberate as she moved through the hall, observing the layers of human interaction. Every subtle smile, every gentle gesture she noticed reminded her that life was not defined by humiliation alone, and that even amidst cruelty, kindness had the power to flourish. Her mind returned to Ethan, to the stranger, to all the small anchors of empathy that had carried her this far. She realized that while Michael's party had been designed to break her, it had inadvertently revealed the world's quiet resilience, and her place within it. Each kind act she gave tonight, each supportive glance or soft word, was a form of rebellion against cruelty, a testament to the enduring power of human decency. The young woman she had helped lingered near the edge of the alcove, still trembling, still in need of reassurance. Lily knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "You're stronger than you think," she whispered, the words carrying more weight than any public victory could. "And you're not alone." The woman nodded, her relief palpable, and Lily felt a profound sense of fulfillment ripple through her chest. Meanwhile, Michael had returned to the center of the hall, raising a toast with practiced ease. Yet the room had shifted subtly, whispers of empathy, small gestures of care exchanged between guests, a subtle ripple of humanity that even his orchestrated mockery could not erase. The power he thought he wielded so effortlessly was quietly undermined, not through confrontation, but through the resilience of quiet kindness. The night was nearing its climax, and the opulent lights of the ballroom reflected off crystal walls like shards of glass suspended in time. Lily stood at the far end, her chest still tight from the echoes of Michael's orchestrated ridicule, but her mind was clear, sharp, and unwavering. She had witnessed the full extent of his plan, yet she now understood the fragile truth behind his confidence. Fear and humiliation were tools, yes, but they could never touch the essence of someone who had found strength in compassion. Michael strode toward the center of the room, his movements measured and controlled, expecting a response that would confirm his dominance. He didn't notice, not fully, how his eyes betrayed the faint tremor of uncertainty, the subtle recognition that Lily had endured, had learned, and had risen above his spectacle. As he raised his glass once more, a hush fell over the crowd, the air thick with anticipation. It was the moment of his ultimate triumph, or so he thought. Lily took a steady breath, stepping into the open space. Her voice, soft yet unwavering, cut through the music and the murmurs. "Michael," she said, calm and deliberate, "you've shown everyone what you wanted. You've humiliated me, orchestrated fear, and displayed your power." The room quieted further, all eyes turning toward her. "But there's something you missed. Strength isn't in the fear you instill. Strength is in the kindness you give, the resilience you build, and the humanity you preserve." A gasp rippled through the crowd, some shocked at her audacity, others moved by her courage. Michael's smirk faltered slightly, and for a heartbeat, the man who had seemed untouchable now seemed human, vulnerable, exposed beneath the veneer of arrogance. Lily's eyes softened as she continued, "I won't let humiliation define me. I won't repay cruelty with cruelty. Tonight has shown me the power of compassion, and that is a force you cannot command, no matter how meticulous your plans." The stranger she had met earlier, along with Ethan who had quietly stayed near the edges, gave subtle nods of support. Lily's voice resonated not just through the hall but through the invisible threads connecting hearts and minds present in the room. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. She glanced at Michael, and for the first time, truly looked at him, the man who had once been her partner, her confidant, her friend. "Be honest, could you forgive after what they did?" Type "forgive" if you could, or "never" if it would break you too deeply. Her eyes reflected a quiet forgiveness, not for him, but for herself, the liberation from carrying hatred, the reclaiming of her own peace. The ballroom seemed to breathe with her words, the air heavy with revelation. Guests who had been laughing, whispering, or mocking now felt the weight of their observations shift. It wasn't vengeance that commanded respect, it was the dignity to rise above, the courage to honor humanity even in the face of cruelty. Lily had not sought revenge. Instead, she had demonstrated the most formidable kind of strength, the ability to remain compassionate, to nurture hope, and to carry forward a quiet power that could not be dismantled by mockery or fear. Michael's expression changed in subtle increments, surprise, disbelief, then something resembling introspection. The power dynamic had shifted in silence. He had orchestrated a night meant to dominate, to humiliate, and to control, but in doing so, he had underestimated the quiet, persistent force of human decency. Lily had turned his spectacle into a mirror, reflecting not only his cruelty but the strength of every unseen act of kindness in the room. She allowed a soft smile to touch her lips, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced since the evening began. Her gaze drifted toward Ethan, toward the stranger, and to the young woman she had comforted. Each connection, each shared empathy, had culminated in a quiet triumph far greater than public humiliation. If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope, maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. Michael lowered his glass, and for the first time, there was no smirk. He seemed to process the night's lessons silently, the sting of his failed control settling like dust. Lily didn't need an apology, and she didn't demand one. The revelation was enough. She had witnessed the fragility of orchestrated power, and the enduring strength of kindness and resilience. Her final steps carried her through the now quieter ballroom. Guests were observing, some whispering, others reflecting silently. Lily approached the exit, feeling the rain-slick streets calling to her like a cleansing river. Each drop mirrored her journey, the cold sting of betrayal, the warmth of empathy, and the clarity of understanding. She had endured, not by fighting cruelty with cruelty, but by allowing the quiet force of humanity to guide her path. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, I felt you. Outside, the city lights reflected in puddles, rippling under the soft drizzle. Lily inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the night lift. Michael's party had intended to humiliate, to diminish her, but she had transformed the evening into a testament, that compassion and resilience could outshine cruelty, and that hope could survive even in the most orchestrated darkness. She walked forward into the night, leaving the echoes of laughter and mockery behind. North their place was a quiet truth, dignity is chosen, strength is cultivated, and kindness, no matter how small, can illuminate the path through any storm. And as the rain fell gently around her, she allowed herself to finally feel it, the gentle warmth of moral triumph, the soft glow of redemption, and the serene hope that even in a world designed for humiliation, humanity could still prevail. The night was over, but her story, the one she had reclaimed, was just beginning. The story ends here with moral warmth.